Hey there, and welcome back to the Route 1 Rundown. I'm your host, Steve Gorgie, and I'm thrilled to be back for another episode to talk some Terps. Today, I'm joined by Isaac Trotter, who's been kind enough to join me to talk about the roster Buzz Williams has put together in his first offseason here in College Park, as well as what's going on with the rest of the Big Ten as we look ahead to the 2026 season. Isaac's a national college basketball writer for 24/7 and CBS Sports, so make sure you check out all of his great work there and follow him on Twitter at Isaac_Trotter. And if you've been listening to the show for a while, or any of the previous podcasts that I've done, you know I'm not just saying this because he's here on the screen with me, but for my money, there is no better college basketball writer that I'd rather read than Isaac. I reference his work all the time, and I'm beyond pumped to have him on the show today. So Isaac, thanks so much for joining me. How are you?
What's up, man? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it's a pleasure. I reference your work all the time. I mean, there's nobody like you who is breaking down the tiers of each conference in June with the depth that you are. So I'm just unbelievably excited to have you on. Anytime I can find somebody who is that knowledgeable on college hoops, it's just a joy for me to read.
Yeah, no, basketball is my life, so I appreciate the kind words. You know, this is what I care about the most. I remember as a kid, I was doing this stuff when I was like 12. Projected starting lineups, who's got coming into the team, what are like how good could this group be? Like, this is something that I really cared about even when I was young. So it's definitely a dream job, and it's fun to talk Terps because I feel like, you know, last year it felt like Maryland basketball's felt like Maryland again, right? Like it felt like they got their swagger back a little bit. And then things change. So it's just a fascinating team in the construct of how important college basketball is, both right there locally, but also Maryland's place nationally.
Well, awesome. Excited to dive into all of that with you. But before we do, just a reminder to everybody out there that this show is on YouTube, and it's part of the Department of Hoops, a DMV Media Network. So if you're listening to the show in audio form, but you want to watch it, you got to go on YouTube and check it out. It's youtube.com/@Department of Hoops. If you love local basketball, then you're going to love the Department of Hoops because we're covering it all from the Terps to the Wizards to mid-major hoops. Everything is there at the Department of Hoops. And you can also find me across all social media platforms at the same handle. It's at Gorg on Sports. So Isaac, where I want to start today is not necessarily where I anticipated starting. Obviously, Kevin Willard and Maryland had a messy divorce this past March. It came at the absolute worst time, and it was very public. I thought we had moved past a lot of that, but here locally, a story came out earlier this week in the Baltimore Sun about Kevin Willard's time here at Maryland and his level of discontent. One of the more explosive quotes from that story was from Harry Geller, somebody who was running Maryland's NIL collective previously. And according to Geller, what Willard told him is that he's never seen a place that cares less about winning in basketball than this. Now, I think there are a lot of people that would disagree with that characterization. So I ask you, when you think about this Maryland basketball program, when you think about its history, its current resources, its current infrastructure, where do you see them in terms of just the broader college basketball landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think that quote is hyperbole, and I think anybody who knows Kevin Willard has talked to him a little bit. There is maybe some over-dramatization at times that we've heard from him. You know, there have been times where, you know, a couple years ago at Big Ten Media Days, he'll say crazy things. Last year, he says some funny stuff. I just don't think that's accurate. Point blank. I just don't think that's accurate. And I understand where he's coming from, the frustration of it. There was a lot of turmoil at Maryland, as you've well documented over the past, up the chain, so to speak. And I think that there is maybe a little bit of a gap between what Kevin Willard believed, like his resources were required to win a national championship, and what Maryland thought was possible at that job. And I think that might be more the disconnect. And, I look at some of these other high major teams, like, there are college basketball coaches everywhere that don't think they have enough money. Everybody says that. Like, you can go into the SEC and they have the best money in college basketball right now. And what is their big thing? Oh, they're worried about Big East and if they're going to have more money than them in the rev share era moving forward. Like, everybody feels like that. And so I think it's a little bit of like Kevin Willard strong-arming people trying to get his way a little bit and to say a quote like that, because I just don't think that's accurate long-term.
Yeah, fair enough. So let's turn our attention to the guy who is here at Maryland now, who is in College Park, who did want to be here, and in fact left an SEC school to be here at Maryland. Buzz Williams will not have a single player that was on last year's Sweet 16 team on this season's roster. He's put together a roster fairly quickly over the past 2 months, using mostly the transfer portal, but has brought in Darius Adams, a pretty highly touted high school guy. What's your impression at a high level of the roster that Buzz Williams has put together over the last 2 months?
Well, they've instantly become one of the most athletic teams in the Big Ten. I think when you see the addition of Pharrell Payne, when you see Solomon Washington, and when you see Elijah Saunders, those three guys, just to start there, the size, the physicality, and the pop is just something that's different. And I think that Buzz does a really nice job of recruiting guys that fit exactly with what he wants to play like. And we know what Buzz Williams basketball looks like. They are wanting to punk you on the offensive glass, and they want to play extremely physical defensively. You don't get very many shots at the rim against Texas A&M when Buzz was the head coach. I think that similar recipe of elite on the offensive glass, limiting shots at the rim defensively, and really, like that loading up on high-level athletes in that front court is going to be, a staple of this group. I've called Solomon Washington maybe the best wing defender in college basketball. I genuinely believe that. I think that he goes in every night and could guard the best wings in the Big Ten and believes that he can turn their water off. And then when you weaponize Pharrell Payne and then you bring in Elijah Saunders, who is a big-time athlete, I think rim defense and dominating at the rim on both ends is going to be a strength. The roster, though, is kind of hinging for me on Miles Rice, and he is such an interesting player because I love him. Like, I absolutely love him. I've gone to war for him when he transferred out of Washington State to Indiana. I thought he was going to be a breakout player there, and now I just have to double down on it. He's like a post-type sleeper for me, and I think if he could refine just like that swagger again, find like the joy in basketball. Last time, like if you watched Indiana last year, there were times where he was like didn't even want to shoot. Like he was scared to shoot the basketball. And so I think that like Buzz does a really nice job of infusing a lot of confidence into his lead guards. If Miles Rice finds that confidence again, the complexion of Maryland changes, and I think they're a pretty safe tournament team because their floor is really high because of the defense, the rebounding, and the rim dominance that Buzz has put together.
Yeah, it's hard not to love the Miles Rice story. It's hard not to love everything that he's battled through and been through. It was hard not to love that 2024 Kyle Smith-led Washington State team and everything they were doing in a dying Pac-12. And it was disappointing to see, kind of the player that he was last year at Indiana. I agree. I think that he is a prime kind of buy low rebound candidate. You talked a little bit about Miles Rice. You talked a little bit about Buzzball. One of the things it's hard to separate when you think about Buzz Williams the last few years at Texas A&M is the way that he used Wade Taylor IV and how much they relied on him. Is Miles Rice kind of capable of filling that similar type of role for Buzz Williams at Maryland this season?
I don't think so. I just think they're different players. Wade walked on the floor being like, "Oh, I'm volleyball line, 35 feet, pulling." Like I'm totally confident pulling from the parking lot. I think Miles plays with a little bit more pace. I think Wade walks on the floor trying to score. I think there's times where I watch Miles, and he really does a nice job of getting guys better. And every coaching staff that you talk to about Miles Rice, the first thing they say is the first step is electric. And Wade's first step was similarly like quick like that. And so I think Miles can have a similar type of impact, more as the shots he creates, not necessarily the shots he always takes. And I think that just him dialing in as like, I'm going to be a paint touch guard all the time. I'm constantly getting 2 feet into the paint. I'm spraying it out. I'm going to find my shooters. I think they did a good job of prioritizing Watts in the portal. I think he's going to be a really nice addition for them because his strengths are different than Miles Rice. Like he's not a guy that you necessarily trust to play in a ton of ball screens. You want to play him off the ball. You want him to be, an off movement shooter. And so pairing him with Rice, it makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of like the addition of Watts and even Adams, so to speak, makes me a lot more bullish on Miles Rice kind of finding himself at Maryland compared to what it was at Indiana, where Indiana had a similar type of thing with like the two big lineup in the back court or in the front court, but their guards were low volume, not great shooters. That like it just was clunky. Like it's really clunky. And I think the fit at Maryland makes a whole lot more sense. And I think if he's constantly getting to the rim, getting to that float game, getting pressure on the rim, getting to the free throw line, and then you add in continual strides with his jumper, I think he could have a really nice year. I just don't know if he's going to be that Wade Taylor of like, hey, he's going to score 27 tonight or 2. Like that felt like the Wade Taylor experiment.
Sure, absolutely. So you mentioned the shooting there, and I think Maryland fans are excited about a lot of things with this roster. I think they're certainly excited about Pharrell Payne and Solo Washington coming over, some proven guys from the SEC. I think they're even excited about a guy like Andre Mills, who redshirted at A&M, but is getting some decent buzz kind of behind the scenes. They're certainly excited about Darius Adams. Anytime you can get a McDonald's All-American, the fan base is going to be excited about that. But if you polled 100 Maryland fans what their biggest concern is right now, I think 99 would probably say outside shooting. And I don't know if it's because that's kind of what Maryland fans lived through just 2 years ago in 2024 when the Terps were one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the country. It could be partly that these A&M teams the past couple of years haven't shot the ball really well. How concerned should Maryland fans be about their outside shooting in 2026?
No, it's definitely a concern. I think Diggy Coit can certainly help out with that too, coming off the bench, giving you 12 to 14 minutes of just, when the threes go in, Diggy Coit's a helpful player. When the threes do not go in, he can get a little bit exacerbated. Some of his flaws get exacerbated. But, I think the most important thing for Maryland is more the turnover rate. It's not necessarily the threes, because getting a shot on the rim is like a win for Buzz Williams. Like that's what he wants. He wants to get a shot on the rim. It's like soccer, shots on goal. Like that's the type of archetype that Buzz Williams wants to have. And Miles Rice has been a very high turnover guy the last few years. Part of that is the system. Part of that is the situation. So can he continue to elevate and grow as he's playing more, right? Like last year, 2 years ago, like he was coming off of cancer, hadn't had a lot of on-ball reps. So like we'll be fine with the turnover rate. Last year, you can maybe be like, oh, that turnover rate was high because he wasn't playing with a lot of skill. There wasn't a lot of shooting at Indiana. It was a pretty archaic offense. So you can kind of explain the turnover rate. This year, though, it just has to be lower, because if you're turning it over and you have three-point shooting concerns, that's a problem. Now, there are some questions with this roster building. I think we saw last year a lot of teams that underwhelmed paired a point guard who didn't shoot threes at a high volume or very efficiently with a center who doesn't shoot. On paper, Maryland has that, right? Like with Payne and Rice. But that's where guys you have to get something out of Watts. Watts just has to make threes at a high level this year. And I think Saunders could really, really shoot it a little bit better than what he's shown at times as well, too. I think he could be a 38, 39% three-point shooter. Just look at some of the way it comes off his hand, the way he shoots the basketball, the type of shots I think he'll get. I think Maryland will do a good job of getting him good looks. And if he gets higher quality looks for a guy that I trust the shot mechanics, I think he could be a big part of the solution. Because you're right, I totally understand people that go like, oh, Maryland's outside shooting is going to be a concern because if you pair Rice with Washington and Payne, I mean, how many threes are you getting out of that trio together next year? 35? Like that's probably in the range of outcomes. And that means the other two spots have to really ramp it up.
Let's turn our attention to the Big Ten at large here. Something Maryland didn't have to worry really about this offseason was any NBA draft stay or go decisions. But who were the winners and losers, in your view, in the Big Ten at the draft withdrawal deadline?
So Michigan is probably the biggest winner. I think a lot of people thought that Yaxel Lendeborg could potentially stay, but Michigan, I mean, when an NIL deal starts with a 3 and it's got a lot of zeros after that, it's hard to turn that down. And I think Yaxel Lendeborg heading back to Michigan for over $3 million is a big time win for them. You kind of go up and down this group. Like I think you feel pretty good about what a team like Ohio State could look like now that they got Bruce Thornton back. I think Oregon is a sneaky big winner, getting Nate Biddle back. He was one of my favorite players in college basketball last year. The rim protection is obviously terrific, but it's kind of weird. Wisconsin's probably the only other one at that stay or go deadline that you feel great about, because Blackwell coming back gives you an opportunity to be a really, really good team. But for the most part, the Big Ten they kind of lost a lot of guys at this deadline, where it felt like I think the Big Ten's gonna have 8 potential first round picks. But Michigan obviously getting their guy back, Washington obviously getting Blackwell back and Oregon getting Biddle back is probably the 3 biggest wins.
Yeah, it felt like the SEC was kind of the big winner at the deadline there, at the withdrawal deadline. It felt like it was a bunch of guys coming back there, not so many in the Big Ten. I want to turn my attention to the top of the league, or the projected top of the league. And for pretty much everybody, Purdue is going to be one of the favorites to win the league and get back to a Final Four, possibly win a national championship this season. And it's easy to see why, right? They bring back Braden Smith, Conference Player of the Year. They bring back another first-team All-Big Ten guy in Trey Kaufman-Renn. They add Oscar Clough, the coveted big from South Dakota State, in the portal. It's really easy to see what there is to like about Purdue. But down the stretch last season, there were times it felt like they just could not get a stop. You couldn't trust them to get a stop. Should we expect this defense to be markedly improved in 2026?
I think there's a chance it is. Daniel Jacobson is the key to this. He missed almost all of last year with an injury. He's 7'4". He's up to 255 pounds. Do I need to say anything else? It's a Purdue guy who's 7'4". I think the rim defense is going to be awesome with him on the floor. Now I'm with you though. Like, we could talk about rim defense, and they've been buffed up their interior defense with Oscar Clough, right? I think they're going to rebound it a little bit better. That all helps. But there's still point of attack concerns defensively with Purdue. Nobody is scared of Fletcher Lawyer defensively. Not very many people are scared of Braden Smith on the ball. So I think that Purdue's floor defensively is much, much higher because of the elite rim protection that Jacobson can provide. But I'm with you. There's going to be times where that perimeter defense could not be it's just not going to be a strength of that group, I don't think, next year.
Isaac, let's wrap up with this. The Big Ten did see some change in the coaching ranks this offseason. It wasn't just Maryland, but Darren DeVries at Indiana, Ben McCollum at Iowa, Nico Medved at Minnesota. I think it was a good coaching cycle for the Big Ten, to be honest. Which one of those four guys do you see being most ready to have success in year one?
Boy, I think all four of these guys could make the tournament. I don't think a lot of people would say that right now, but I love what Nico Medved's done at Minnesota. I think that team is way better than people think. I think Indiana looks like a tournament team to me, a very high floor team. Iowa, I think if I could let go of Fran McCaffrey and hire a guy like Ben McCollum, I would have done that 10 out of every 10 times. And I think Maryland is the same type of deal where even though Kevin Willard departs, there is an opportunity in place here for Buzz, who's constantly building NCAA tournament caliber teams, to make the tournament. I wouldn't say that the Big Ten had a good coaching carousel. I'd argue they had the best. Like, they freaking crushed it with their additions in this coaching carousel. I think they have an opportunity to all be really, really successful. If I have to pick one, I've said Indiana just because I like the idea that of DeVries building a roster that makes more sense to me. They're not going to be a great rim protection team, but at Drake, DeVries' teams were one of the best teams in the country at limiting shots at the rim, and they have a lot of size, they have a lot of vets, they have a lot of shooting. Their point guards always get to the paint, so they built a roster that makes sense, even though maybe it's not like the most like high major-y level type things. There's a lot of mid-major guys on that roster, but it makes sense, which is a big difference from Indiana rosters in the past, which have had a lot of talent, a lot of money, and nothing makes sense. So if I had to pick two, it'd probably be Indiana 1 and then Iowa 2, because I think Bennett Sturtz, the new point guard there, if you haven't watched a ton of him, holy cow, what a player. And Alvaro Forgairis, keep an eye on him as well. The transfer out of Robert Morris. I think he's going to be a really impactful player there as well, too. So, yeah, but I genuinely do think that all four of those new coaches could find their way in the NCAA tournament in year one, which is would be a pretty big deal for the Big Ten.
No doubt about it. Well, Isaac, thank you so much for the time. This was an absolute blast. Again, for my money, Isaac Trotter, the best college basketball writer out there right now. Check out his work, 24/7 Sports, CBS Sports on Twitter, Isaac_Trotter. Isaac, thanks so much for the time.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. That's the show for today. I'll be back next week, and we'll start diving in team by team to what's going on in the Big Ten. That's the goal over the summer. Get you ready to understand the teams the Terps will be having to play and beat in 2026 if they want to make the NCAA tournament. Of course, always talking the latest Terps news as well. That's the show for today. Until next time, this has been the Route 1 Rundown.